We're talking today with Mr. Willard Bosserman of Byron Center, Michigan. The interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Mr. Bosserman, can you begin by giving us some background on yourself, to start with where you were born?
Yeah, I was born on a farm over in New Haven Township, Gratiot County, Michigan.
Okay, and what year?
In, in 1924.
All right. And what did your family do for a living?
Well, my dad was a farmer. Actually, he graduated from the 8th grade, went up to Ferris. I guess at that time it was a teacher's institute. And I don't know how long he was there, but he come back and taught country school for 3 years. Mm-hmm. And I have a picture of him at home. I guess it was in June or May it was, after school was going to be out for the summer, and half the kids were barefoot. My kids went barefoot in those days, so I did too when I was young and at home. Then, when I was 4 years old, the family moved to Carson City, and Dad owned a whole block there, and he continued farming. He had a truck garden business and sold vegetables and fruits there, and the people in Carson City, I might say that whole block now is owned by the Carson City Hospital.
All right.
Because it was just in the next block that they started that hospital. And so now the old house that I was brought up in is gone.
Mm-hmm. Now, did the block just have that one house on it, or were there other houses that your father would rent out?
No, this was the only house.
Okay.
We had a barn, and we had a cow, and we raised a pig once in a while.
Right.
And we had, of course, lots of chickens.
Okay. And now, how much education did you have?
Well, I had high school out at Carson City, and then after the service, I enrolled at Michigan State University, and I got a bachelor's degree there. And then later on, as I was working, they insisted that we have an advanced degree, so I ended up with a master's degree.
All right. Well, we'll get to some of that post-war stuff at the end of the interview. In the meantime, before Pearl Harbor happened, how much did you know about what was going on in the world?
Well, I don't know. We kept pretty close at what was actually happening over in Europe. And, of course, we learned to not like the Germans very well. Mm-hmm.
Now, would you get your information from newspapers or the radio or newsreels or?
Oh, I delivered the Detroit Free Press. Mm-hmm. So we had a paper to read and kept up with it with the paper.
Okay. All right. Now, do you remember hearing about Pearl Harbor? Or how you heard about that?
Yes, my memory's a little bit hazy about that. Seems to me I was delivering papers that Sunday, but otherwise it wouldn't have been on Sunday's paper yet.
Unless there was an extra that came out, which would have been true in Detroit. I don't know about up in Carson City or not.
I don't think it was there in Carson City, but anyway, I was delivering papers either just before or after Pearl Harbor. So, mm-hmm. Yeah, it shook us up pretty well.
Right. Now, once the war started, you were still, what, about 16 then, or? Because that's end of 41 or 17?
When it started?
Yeah.
That'd been 39, I think.
Well, the invasion of Poland is 39, but I was actually asking about Pearl Harbor. So Pearl Harbor is the end of 41.
I must have been 17 because when I graduated from high school, I was 19.
Okay. That's right, because you were born in 24. All right. So when Pearl Harbor happened, then did you think about the prospect of enlisting, or how did you view the prospect of getting in the military?
No, I wasn't thinking about enlisting. The church I belonged to was the Church of the Brethren in New Haven Township. We met with the adult group, us 3 seniors in high school, and we discussed this back and forth because that church were conscientious objectors, and so we didn't really have to go to military. But we discussed this off and on for weeks and weeks, and finally 2 of us seniors decided we would not enlist, but would go when drafted to serve our country.
Right.
And the other one was a preacher's son, and he took the deferment, and I guess he had some kind of civil training that they went through, but Might have been worse than the Army.
All right. Okay. But you decided, okay, so you get drafted. So when do you get drafted?
Well, I got drafted when I was still in high school, but I got a deferment for a couple of weeks anyway, and so I could graduate.
Right.
But then the action started right away. I took my first exam in Greenville, which was about 20 miles away from Carson City. And as I recall, I had a little happening there. I was standing in line to take blood pressure, and a couple of people ahead of me was a little obese, and they had a hard time finding his vein. The next thing I knew, they was picking me up off the floor.
So you fainted just by looking at the guy getting the blood test?
Well, this is a psychological thing that started before that. I remember when they were giving vaccinations and shots in school, my sisters come home, oh, this person fainted, that person fainted. Well, I thought that was the thing to do. Anyway, I did. Then the next visit was down to Detroit, and my best friend went with me, and he was rejected for some reason. I think maybe he was underweight. He was a little slimmer than I was, and they accepted me, and they gave me 2 weeks. I had choice. They could take me right now and go in the Navy, or go in the Army. You could have 2 weeks vacation. So I chose the Army.
All right. Now, where did they send you after Detroit?
Well, I guess I had to go back to Greenville to catch a train. Then we went down to Fort Custer.
Right. And Fort Custer is where they sort men out and figure out where they're going to go.
Right. Because I had quite a lot of mechanical background, because all the kids I run around with are mechanics. And I applied for the Air Force because I was also in high school. I was an airplane nut, made model airplanes, and I was going to be a flyer. But when they had taken the blood test there at Fort Custer, I got a little white, and they says, well, I don't know, we showed your record here, you passed out in Greenville, and I don't think we can use you as a pilot. So I was rejected from the Air Force, and I called it, well, it was probably the good Lord, because otherwise I might have gotten the Air Force and not lived through it. So because of my mechanical background, they put me in the Army Ordnance.
All right. And a lot of people who are listening to this might not even know what the term Army Ordnance means. So what is that?
Well, and in our Army Ordnance, we had people in there trained to fix trucks. My classification was half-track engine mechanic. Of course, you know, they interpreted that's half-track engine mechanic, which might have been more accurate. But anyway, I was the truck mechanic. And then they had people who worked on instruments, and we had people that worked on small iron arms, on rifles and machine guns. Right. Then we had people that worked on cannons and this thing. So we started out as a medium maintenance, and we didn't do all of that kind of work. But they give us mechanics, mule training and mechanics, and we had lectures by civilian people who come in. And
all right. Now, where were you getting this training? Did they send you from Fort Custer somewhere else?
Oh, yeah, and down Fort Jackson, South Carolina.
Okay.
And this is where we got the training.
All right. Now, how did they get you down to South Carolina?
Untrained.
All right. Do you remember much about that train ride?
Well, yeah, I was always looking out the window. I was hoping to see some palm trees, but we didn't see any palm trees in South Carolina.
Okay. Now, what kind of place was Fort Jackson?
It's still there. It's still. I saw a news article just yesterday or the day before. They were interviewing some people from Fort Jackson. It was an active camp. It was right out of Columbia, South Carolina, and that's where we went when we had a pass. Just took the bus in Columbia.
Okay. Now, of course, you'll go down south, go into South Carolina. That's a segregated society and so forth. Did you notice that? I mean, you wouldn't have had a whole lot of black people probably up in Carson City or something like that.
No, we didn't in Carson City. I didn't notice it too much. Of course, there were so many GIs in town that you didn't notice notice if there was blacks or not. Now, when we were out in the field, we serviced black units, their equipment and such.
Right. Okay. So we'll make sure to get into that once we get you overseas. So, what was sort of the daily life like in training at this point? What did they have you do?
Well, we would go to classes and train, and then we'd go out in the shop and start working on vehicles. We had a maintenance manual, and we always followed the maintenance manual pretty close. And one time when we was in Fort Jackson, we went out in the field. We were supposed to be out there for 3 days, I think, but we got 6 inches of snow, if you can believe that. And so we folded up our little pup tents and went back into Columbia and Fort Jackson. And the natives there said, "Why, we've never had snow like that before."
Right. Now, did they give you much physical training? Did you have
Oh
to
yeah,
do
we had
running?
physical training, and we had calisthenics, and we ran up Tank Hill. There was a big water tank at the top of this hill. And then the first thing in the morning, we'd run up the top Tank Hill, back down. Yeah, so we kept in pretty good shape.
Did they put a lot of emphasis on discipline and following orders?
Oh yes, yeah, that's a part of the Army. You've got to follow orders, or it wouldn't work very good out in combat.
Sure. Okay. Now, did you have any trouble adjusting to life in the Army?
Not too much. I thought I might get homesick, but I tried not to think of home too much, and so we got along pretty well. So we learned also combat stuff. We did bayonet training, and so we had to go out to the rifle range and shoot the rifle, lay in that old hot sand, and lots of times just dry runs. We'd show us how to hold the rifle and just click that. But when I was out in the rifle range, I did learn a sharpshooter's medal. So.
Now, back at home, had you ever handled guns or gone hunting or anything like that, or was this all brand new for you?
Well, against my father's wishes, I did buy a .22, and I bought a 12-gauge shotgun from a friend of mine for $1.50. Just a few years ago, in Grand Rapids, police department was collecting these guns, giving you $50 for it. So I sold it for $50.
Well, by then it was an antique. You might have gotten more than that.
Yeah, it might have been.
Okay. So you had a little bit of experience with guns before. It wasn't, wasn't completely new. Yeah. Okay. So they're doing those things. Now, how long did you stay at Fort Jackson?
We stayed there off and on for 18 months.
Okay. So you finish training and you stay on the same base then?
Yes.
Okay.
But we went, we were changed from medium maintenance to a heavy maintenance. And this meant we had more people in there and they'd work on more things. Although we had trained to work on tanks, we only had one tank in there. And everyone in the automotive platoon had to test drive that tank.
So did you get to drive the tank?
Yeah, just for, to try it out.
So what was it like to drive a tank as opposed to a truck or something like that?
Well, I was changing gears most of the time. And, well, you don't have steering wheel, you have these sticks to stop at one track, so you turn one way and pull it back on the other one, turn the other way.
Okay. Now, when you were driving the tank, how would you know where to go? Could you see out the front at all, or did you just follow orders?
Oh, yeah, we had the port open so we could see well. Otherwise, if he's in combat, you'd have that closed and just little slits to look through.
Yeah.
But I'm not too familiar with tanks. We just had that one tank in.
To that one time.
Yeah.
All right. Now, you're based at Fort Jackson. Did they move you around much for maneuvers or to go other places for training, or did you just stay there?
We went up to Tennessee and had maneuvers there. And it was kind of cool. It was about in March, and we had a little fire there, and I slept with a blanket close as I could get to the fire overnight. And it started warming up. While we were there, we were servicing an infantry company, and there were other people in the platoon, automotive platoon, that was out before we went out. And we went out about the last day, and really the work was pretty well done. So the sergeant was the driver and in charge of our unit. We didn't have anything to do, so we just drove around in the hills of Tennessee. And come noon, we were kind of hungry, so we stopped at this farmhouse and asked the lady if we could get some food. She says, "Yeah, I'll fix you a meal if you'll give my husband a ride in that Jeep." He always wanted to ride the Jeep. Well, then we ran across some moonshiners. And they said they never had any trouble getting sugar to make their stuff. And the sergeant bought a pint of the stuff, and that's pretty potent stuff. And he nibbled a little bit on it. And of course, we was a little concerned, me and the other guy, about his driving, but just, "It's all right, don't worry. I used to race on a dirt track back in Chicago." But we made it back to Fort Jackson. Well, no, we didn't go back to Fort Jackson. We went back to the camp in Tennessee. It was near Nashville.
Okay, so in the middle part of Tennessee then.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because there were some very big maneuvers that went on in Tennessee. Was that spring of '44 then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the infantry, they were having their combat maneuvers. They had the red team, the blue team.
Right. So what was the job of an ordnance company in that situation? Were you just maintaining their transport, or?
Yeah, we would go out to different units and repair their vehicles if they needed repair.
Right. Okay. Now, were you assigned to a specific ordnance company by this time? So what unit were you with?
Yeah, we were assigned at different times. We were assigned, let me see, when we were in Tennessee, we were assigned to the 26th Infantry Division.
But what was the name of or number of your company?
301st.
Okay.
And heavy maintenance field, field.
Okay. All right. And after the Tennessee maneuvers, then, did you go back to Fort Jackson again?
Yeah, we went back to Fort Jackson, but we also went to Camp McCall. And this was a parachute group. And we had to get their vehicles and their small arms and stuff fixed up. And I think that was the place where they was having some trouble with their rifles, that they weren't blued properly, and so they had to ship them back and forth till they got that done. But one morning we got out there in our platoon, automotive platoon, and our lieutenant was in charge of that platoon. He says, "You guys be careful of these parachuters, they're tough people. You people can't box yourself out of a paper bag." I guess he finally got chewed out for that statement, but we got along famously with them. And I understand from this paper that our fellow soldier wrote that the paratroopers got the same message about us. So, like I say, we got along famously. So we got their equipment all ship-shape so they could go overseas.
All right. Now, Camp McCall, what state was that in? Was that in South Carolina or somewhere else?
In North Carolina.
North Carolina. Okay.
Yeah. Then we went back to Fort Jackson after that. Then we gave some maintenance service to the 87th Infantry Division when we were back there in camp. Then we went to Camp Rucker in Alabama. And I wrote home that I had heat rash on my stomach. And my sisters asked, "Well, where'd you have a heat rash?" And I said, "In Alabama." So it reminded me of that every once in a while. On our trip to Camp Rucker, we took the train. And in our, we had barracks right next to the Army band. So when we marched over to get the train, this Army band led us.
Now, what were you doing at Camp Rucker?
What did we do in Camp Rucker? Well, we serviced We serviced an infantry division, a 66th Infantry Division there, getting their equipment ready to go overseas.
Okay, so probably part of why you stayed in the United States as long as you did, because a lot of men who were drafted when you would have been shipped out earlier,
Right,
was
yeah.
because you had a job to do in the States to
Yes.
get these other units prepared to actually go overseas.
Yeah, that was part of our job, was to prepare these people's equipment.
Okay.
Like I said, I was a truck mechanic, but we had small arms mechanics that
Right.
fixed theirs and the
You fix-
instruments. And
Yeah. And you fix the artillery and the tanks and anything else
Mm-hmm.
they had. Okay. Now, how long did you keep doing this? Going from place to place, preparing units to go overseas?
well, we did it until we had a red alert in November of 1944, and that meant we was going to get ready to go overseas ourselves. And so we shipped out on the 26th of December, 44, to Camp Shanks,
That's in New Jersey or New York or
New York.
New York, yeah,
Camp
Shanks,
Shanks,
New
New
York,
York, but New Jersey, and we were there for about a month, and it was cold.
Yep.
And when we got into the barracks the first night, they had those stoves in there heated with hard coal, and that don't start very well. So it was a long time getting that fire going. So barracks wasn't full, so we would use a mattress on top of us until it got a little heat in there. And one night, some of us went into the Weehawken, New Jersey shipyards, and we hired out as stevedores. Just one night. Then we went into New York and toured New York. And they had subways in New York, and it was kind of fun traveling through the subways.
And did they have a lot of facilities set up in New York for the soldiers? Were there places you could go where they'd feed you and that kind of thing, or USO or Red Cross or that sort of stuff?
No, not where they may have had them there, but we didn't go to the Red
didn't go.
Cross because
Okay.
we were well fed ourselves in our own kitchens.
Right.
And another thing that I observed was when people were coming back from overseas, they didn't have much fresh vegetables, and boy, they would get these quarter heads of lettuce, and they just loved those things.
All right. But you mentioned you decided to go work as stevedores for one night in Weehawken. Why did you do that?
Was something to do.
Okay.
Because we were there, we didn't really have any vehicles or any equipment to service, so we were just finding things to do.
So were you loading a ship or unloading a ship? Or?
We were loading,
Okay.
and we had these hooks that we'd clamp onto the bales of stuff until we clamped onto a carton of canned goods. It didn't work out so well that way.
All right. So you're there, you're at Camp Shanks for about a month, and then they ship you overseas at that point?
Yep, we went overseas. We boarded SS Washington. That was, and we arrived at Liverpool on the 16th of February.
Okay. Now, what kind of boat was the Washington?
I guess it was a transport boat. I mean, it was a cruise ship of some kind.
So it's a converted cruise ship, so it's a pretty big ship?
It had, there were 6,000 of us on board.
All right.
It took us 10 days to get there.
Okay. And now, was it an easy ride or a rough one?
Well, it was fairly easy, except our company commander was always looking out for us people. Instead of just not doing anything, he got us to work. And our particular job was working in with the kitchen, or the galley, I guess they call it. We was working in this meat place, and we was on about the third deck up. Had the porthole open, and all at once water gushed in there in that porthole. So it must have been rough on the outside. So we closed the porthole, and of course the water just kind of drained away. But we had to pick up the pork chops floating around.
Well, you were brining the pork chop. That's all.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, did a lot of the men get seasick?
Yes, they did. I didn't get seasick myself, but I had butterflies in my stomach most of the time. Well, the sea was a little bit rough anyway.
Yeah.
Then our job working in the galley there, we had to, at night, take the garbage and stuff down to pail and dump it overboard.
All right.
So
So did the sharks come to eat whatever you threw overboard?
I didn't see the sharks.
Okay.
But we did it that at night so submarines couldn't find us the trip.
Okay.
I understand, rumor that the SS Washington later was sank, but I didn't know if there was troops on it or not.
Yeah. That's probably one that can be looked up, at least if it was sunk by a U-boat. One could look that up probably and find that out somewhere.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, now when you sailed, did the Washington sail by itself or in a convoy?
We was pretty much by ourselves, but we did have some escort ships
Okay.
with us.
All right. Because sometimes with the cruise ships, they sailed fast enough they thought they could outrun the U-boats. But
They might have.
at least at this time, though, you had some protection.
It was a zigzag course.
Right.
Way out, still it was probably fast.
Right.
Well, when we got into Liverpool, we moved over to another town where our job was scrapping tanks and stuff for ship ballast going back.
Right.
And my friend was very meticulous, give a screwdriver, taking these things down. And I said, "Let's just scrapping these anyway. Let's just get the hammer and whack." But I forgot to take my thumb out that one time and whack. I kid people, I should have put in for a Purple Heart.
Right.
but anyway, we got the job done.
Okay. Now, how long did you spend doing that kind of work?
Oh, we were only there a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Then some of the people were able to get a trip into London. And Germans were still buzz bombing London at the time. And then we went to, where did we go? We went to Southampton, and there we boarded a merchant marine vessel and went over to Le Havre.
Right. And then from there, where did they send you?
We went to Camp Lucky Strike.
Okay.
This was a tent city, and it was a little cool yet, and to service some heat, we'd take these number 10 cans, fill them with sand and gasoline, whatever, give us some heat, a little smoky, but
Yeah.
then when gasoline burned out, I was going to pour some more gasoline in there. Whoosh!
Yeah.
No wonder we didn't lose the tent, but there were some tents burned, and probably about the same kind of procedure.
Right. How long did you have to stay in Lucky Strike?
I think we were there a couple of weeks,
Okay.
and we only got 2 meals a day until we got our own kitchen set up. And then we get 3 meals a day, so it seemed like we'd just stand in line to get breakfast, and a little while later get in line to get our evening meal. But then when we got our own kitchen, I made corporal or technician 5th grade, and when I first went in, I always got my regular duty of KP, kitchen police. And when I got to be a PFC, I said, well, maybe I will get relieved of that job. No, they didn't have enough buck privates, so we still had KP. So when I got to be technician 5th grade, same as a corporal, well, I thought, well, I'd get relieved of my KP job, but I didn't. So I peeled potatoes all the time. I don't remember doing much KP though while we was in the field kitchens. Probably did some though.
Okay. Now, when they move you out finally from Lucky Strike, where do you go?
Well, we went to a town of Aachen, but being a mechanic, we've gotten the last vehicle because if something had truck problems or something and had to drop out, we would stop and fix them. Well, one truck did drop out and had a flat tire, so we fixed that. But the convoy went on ahead. And I remember going through Düren, Germany. That was so destroyed.
Right.
It looked like a snowplow had gone through and just pushed the debris aside.
Yeah.
And then these multiple telephone lines, were just drooping down into the debris. And that was kind of ghostly.
Right. Well, Duran was in the Hurtgen Forest near Aachen, and that had a really, really terrible long battle that took place there. So you're going through and seeing what was left after that.
Yeah, because I think they went through there at least twice.
Right.
Then, yeah, we were going to Aachen, or Aachen.
Yeah.
And I guess we found it.
Now, were you attached to an infantry division at that time, or were you traveling by yourselves?
We were changed to the 15th Army. See, when we were in the States, we were the 2nd Army. And now when we're overseas, we're in the 15th Army. Well, let's see.
Or maybe the 19th
I guess we were
Army?
assigned the 64th Ordnance Group.
Okay. So you're attached basically to the Army, and then the Army sends you to whatever units that it needs to send you to. Okay.
Then at one point, of course, we had engineers in our outfit, and they rigged up a electromagnet on the front of a truck to pick up all those debris on the highways and the stuff that were there purposely or just accidentally, so it wouldn't puncture our tires when we rode around on their thing.
Now, how well did that work?
It worked all right, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, this is another part of the company, and I didn't get involved in it personally and see how it worked, but it worked pretty good.
But you weren't getting a lot of flat tires?
No, we weren't getting any flat tires.
All right.
Now, while we were there, my friend Ed Hahn had a brother over in across the river, and the company commander loaned him a Jeep to go over there, and I rode shotgun. And when we went over the river, it was all those pontoon bridges. Of course, it sunk down there a little bit every time we went over there. But we found his brother. He was in the artillery. And so that was an interesting trip.
Okay. Now, about when was this that you got up to Aachen? Was this sort of March of 45 or April or?
It must have been in April and May when we were there.
So right toward the very end of the war at that point?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see, where were we when the war ended? I guess we were in a town called Peck when the war ended, and we celebrated the ending of the war, well, with Germans.
Right. Now, what did Aachen itself look like when you were there? Because there'd been a lot of fighting there too.
Well, we were billeted in a old resort hotel, and we were on the 3rd floor, and then to get water we had to go down to the main floor and then down to the ridge down below get our water. And while we were there, we had our shop a little ways away from there, not too far away, and one of the guys rigged up one of those old diesel engines. Didn't have a starter on it, so he rigged up a Jeep engine. Get the Jeep engine started, and then to get the diesel engine, we rode back and forth to the billets to the shop and that little one-car train.
Okay. Now, did you see much of the civilian population at all when you were in Aachen?
Not a whole lot of it. We had the rules of no fraternization, but that didn't stop us too much. Well, during the tours over there, we met up with a lot of German POWs. Even when we were in Camp Forest back in the States, we had POWs working with us, and I don't remember any guards being around. They just worked with us. And then in some of the camps in Germany where we were at, they were POWs, and we picked up a few German words, just enough to get by. Then when I'd get back home and then I'd use some of my German words, then if they knew German, they would start conversing in German. Next first day, I don't understand what you're talking about. But then, well, we don't want to get ahead of my story.
All right. So you're in Aachen, and then do they move you out then from Aachen pretty soon, or? Yeah,
we left the billets there at Aachen and moved to an old glider camp. We could still see Aachen from there, but there was a hill there, and they could get those gliders going down that hill. And one evening, another couple of people and I went up there. Of course, we always had to carry our rifles with us. And there was a rabbit. Shoot the rabbit. Well, I'm not shooting that rabbit. Go ahead and shoot it. No, we got to clean our rifles if we shoot. We had to keep those rifles clean for inspection, you know.
Right.
So then after we went there, we went down to Camp Brooklyn. It was about 30 miles from Reims, France. And there we were getting our equipment, putting this cosmoline on it.
Right.
To get overseas. We were scheduled to go over to the Philippines. I didn't know where we were supposed to go until this Casey Medendorp told me later that we were headed for the Philippines. I knew we were going into the Pacific. Anyway, we went from there to Camp Gales in Marseille, and here we were all ready to go. And well, we just using up our time. I think I caught 3 baseball games, or softball. I had a mask though. It was safe for catching. And the other time I was catching, I didn't have a mask. Blink when the ball came by. But about 4 days before we were ready to ship out, they dropped the bomb and Japan surrendered. And instead of going to the Philippines, we got on this little Liberty ship and we headed home. And we was, of course, on the Mediterranean for a couple of days, and just as smooth as glass. And some of the guys said, boy, when I get out of here, I'm going to join the Merchant Marines. But when we got out into the Atlantic, it was a little bit different. And again, I had butterflies, but I didn't get seasick. And so when the sergeants come up, how are you feeling? Well, I feel pretty good. Good, we need some guards. So I had my back up against the bulkhead there, and I was looking down into the ocean. Then I was looking up at the sky, so it was pretty rough and got that rolling effect.
Right. Yeah, I guess it'd be a little bit different from crossing in a big ocean liner. So the trip over, going over to Europe sounds like...
Well, we had a
lot
bigger
better.
ship.
Yeah.
This was a little Liberty ship that it rode rougher.
Yeah, they do. And
Yeah.
they're slower too.
Yeah. Well, and the ship going over, it was about 5 bunks high, I guess. And if you're feeling a little woozy, you'd lay down in your bunk. It would feel a little bit better. Then I couldn't remember where we landed in the States, but it was Newport News, Virginia. And from there, the company was kind of broke up. A bunch of us went to Camp Grant in Rockford, Illinois, and others went to other places closer to their homes where they would be discharged and could go home. But we had to be there until we got enough points to be discharged. So I was there for 9 months, and that's where I met my dear sweet wife. She worked in the USO. Earlier, she worked in the Salvation Army USO, but that closed, and she worked in Walnut Street USO in Rockford. And her mother made the best kind of banana cream pie, and so they invited me and a couple other GIs out to for dinners and have a banana cream pie. So when we finally got to leave, I kept in contact with her. In fact, after I got back to Michigan, I was discharged in April of '46. So when I got back to Michigan, I only stayed there a little while. I went back to Rockford, Illinois, and rented a room. I think I rented a room for $5 a week. Worked for the Piggly Wiggly store.
Right. Now, let's go back a little bit to the time that you spent over in Europe. You had mentioned kind of in passing that some of the units that you worked for were ones that were, I guess, transport units where there were black truck drivers. So you saw some of the men who were the Red Ball Express guys?
Yeah, I don't remember now just what camp it was, but this whole division was black.
Okay.
And we serviced their vehicles. This was back in the States.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because there was a black division that was sent into Italy eventually, 92nd, something like that. Okay, but you were actually servicing vehicles for a black unit as opposed to working on trucks, because in Europe there were units of black truck drivers. There were transportation companies.
Yeah.
But that was a different bunch then.
Yeah. Well, we didn't know what race people were when they brought a vehicle in. I mean, we worked on it.
Right. Okay.
One time, there's when we become a heavy maintenance company, we imported some other people in there. This one guy was from Tennessee, and I always accused him of being vaccinated with the Victrola needle. And he became one of my better friends. But he didn't go overseas with us. He had a bum leg. He was in artillery, and they were making some practice landings in Florida, and he injured his leg. I don't know how bad it was, because I saw him a few years later after the war was over, and his leg looked all right.
Okay. Now, when you were actually up with the units in Germany and so forth, did you move around from division to division or unit to unit to work on their vehicles, or what did you do?
No, we stayed pretty much put when we was overseas, and they would bring their vehicles in, and we would work on them at where we were stationed.
Okay. Now, over the course of that time in Europe, did you have pretty much the same group of men that you were working with?
Oh, yeah.
So these are guys that you trained with and been with all along, and you all go over together and stay together.
We stayed together until we hit the States. Then we got deployed different places.
Right. And what sort of people did you have for officers?
Well, it was pretty good officers. When we first, I guess it was that first place we got in Germany, officer Captain Kolda had us pitch our pup tents. And I guess he got chewed out with the battalion commanders. I said, get these people billeted in houses. So I guess he got relieved of his job, and Lieutenant Blau was promoted to Captain Blau. He was a real good person. And Lieutenant Schultz, he kind of wanted the job, but he was German and he knew the German language, and they could use him better as an interpreter.
Right.
So he was a little put out because he didn't get the job as a company commander, but they used people where they could use them.
Now, were the officers men who were kind of like yourselves, and they were sort of citizen soldier types? They were not, as opposed to people who'd been in the Army for a long time?
Yeah, they were all citizen soldiers, yeah. Our cadre, when we first went to Fort Jackson, the cadre, the people that trained us,
right,
they were professional soldiers. They shipped up from Trinidad, I guess. But they didn't stay with us. They went different places.
Right. Okay. Now, over the course of the time that you spent in Europe, I mean, did your unit ever come under fire or take
No.
of any kind?
No.
So it was a safe place to be on the whole.
Yeah, yeah, pretty safe. And in Germany, I didn't recognize any of them. No, like they have in Iraq. They got these snipers all the time. And like I say, when I went shotgun with my friend across the river to Cologne, we were just concerned that there might be, but we didn't have that. I think people, of course, maybe other people did, saw people shooting at them, but the war was over now, and I didn't see a lot of that you see in Iraq.
Right. Now, it happened in certain places in Germany, and it depended on what kind of soldiers you ran into.
Yeah.
If you saw SS men, for instance, they were a little different from the regulars.
Right.
You said you saw a lot of German prisoners of war in different places, and were those, as far as you can tell, just kind of German regular army soldiers, or who were they?
They were, when we got back to Camp Grant, we still had German POWs in there, and we played cards with them, and they had the free run as long as they were back in the barracks by 10 o'clock.
Right.
And then later, I walk at Rogers Plaza, and there was a ex-German POW there. He was an artist. Well, he was brought over here as a POW. Then he got shipped back home to Germany, and then he came back here to live. And he's since passed away about 3 or 4 years ago. But I got acquainted with him pretty well.
All right. Okay, so you get back, once you did go back home, and then you decided to go and move to Rockford and so forth.
Yes.
Did you get married pretty quickly after you went over to Rockford?
No,
or?
not quickly. I worked there the summer, and then factory work seemed kind of boring for me, so I shipped back in time to go to Lansing to go to Michigan State University, enrolled there. And we got married in the summer between freshman year and sophomore year. I worked at a drop forge that summer, so I had the long holiday weekend off. So that's the day we got married, then we came back.
Right. Now, what did you get your degree in?
In agriculture.
Okay. And did you go into farming, or did you become a farmer at that point, or did
No,
you?
I became an extension agent.
Okay.
Went to Michigan State University.
Right.
Yeah. I started out in Pontiac in Oakland County as an assistant agricultural agent.
Okay. Now, did you have sort of any kind of specialization with that, or as an agricultural agent, did you handle all kinds of agriculture?
We pretty much handled all agriculture, although when I was in Pontiac in Oakland County, I was assigned the livestock aspect of 4-H and fruit. And we had a fruit specialist that worked there, Carl Bailey, and I worked with him quite a bit. So I learned my fruit. In the meantime, I forgot about it. I mean, I forgot the apple varieties and this sort of thing.
Right.
Then I transferred to Port Huron as a 4-H club agent. Then from there, I went up to Lake City and became the agricultural agent for Missaukee and Roscommon County. I was there 11 years and then transferred to just Roscommon and Crawford County. I thought if I got to Roscommon County, I'd only have one county, but they fooled me. So I had Crawford. In both counties, there wasn't what you'd call a real commercial farm. There were some small farmers, but my specialty, well, actually my major was soil conservation. And when I got into Roscommon and Crawford County, I applied more of natural resources.
Right.
So I got involved with planning commissions, and township planning commission, county planning commissions, and I guess I did some of my better work there. So I got awards there for my outstanding conservation work. We're doing agriculture work. Well, there's so many people in agriculture work, you just didn't stand out at all.
All right. And so basically, did you kind of have your whole career then working for the state as an extension agent?
Michigan State University, yes.
All right. Now, to look back on the time that you spent in the Army,
Yes.
what sort of effect do you think that had on you, or what did you learn from that experience?
Well, I learned discipline, and I guess you don't quit. If you're starting a project, you don't quit until you finish it. Either you fail or you don't. You make it. And I think I learned that.
All right. Are there any sort of individual events or things that happened to you that kind of stand out in your mind or come back in your memory that you haven't mentioned here yet in the story?
Well, I don't know. When I was in there, I met a lot of different people. And there was one antagonized me a little bit. And I had some boxing experience in high school. So we're just lounging around there between things we had to do. And they had boxing gloves on her. Hey, put the gloves on with me. And so I put the gloves on with him, and I did no contest. I mean, I've had experience, know how to protect myself, and he didn't. And then there was another one of my friends. Well, actually, he was the one that I rode shotgun with. He always acted pretty tough, and I says, "Hey, how about putting the gloves on with me?" And that was, again, no contest either.
So maybe the guys who were warning those airborne recruits about you, maybe they were right. Maybe they shouldn't mess with you.
No, I didn't mingle with them as much as the ones that, went to the bar, the PX for drinking. But we got along with them as we worked with their vehicles and stuff.
Right.
No problem.
All right.
They were human. They were soldiers.
All right. In that case, I think that probably pretty well wraps up your story. So thanks for taking the time to come in and talk to me
well,
today.
you're certainly welcome.